Elizabeth stood at the kitchen window, coffee forgotten in her hands. Outside, her son Michael loaded the last of her husband's stamp albums into a U-Haul.
It's just paper, Mom. The auction house gave us $400 for the lot.
Those were your father's hands, Michael. 50 years of his life in those pages.
Dad's gone. You don't even open them. They're just collecting dust. Let me help you clear out.
She didn't answer. The last box disappeared into the truck, the leather spine of a 1918 airmail album vanishing under a moving blanket. In the study, Elizabeth ran her fingers over the empty shelf where the albums had rested for decades. A thin layer of dust outlined their absence.
Charles, I couldn't stop him. I am so sorry.
50 years of stamp collecting, reduced to a few $100s. Michael slammed the truck door shut, the sound echoing through the quiet morning.
I'll drop by tomorrow. Maybe we can sort through Dad's study some more. Get rid of the clutter.
Elizabeth watched the truck pull away, her hands trembling against the window pane. The house settled into silence, heavier than it had been since Charles died. The Sunday estate auction drew a restless crowd. Michael stood near the back, arms crossed, already counting the $400 in his head.
Sold to the gentleman in the blue jacket for $11,000. The entire stamp collection, lot 47.
Michael smiled. Higher than expected. But then the auctioneer cleared his throat.
Ladies and gentlemen, a rare treat. A single stamp from that very lot. A 1918 inverted Jenny. We'll open the bidding at $50,000.
The room ignited. Paddles shot up. 50 became 100, then 300,000.
I have 700,000. Do I hear 750? 750 in the front.
Michael's face drained of color. His father's stamp was worth more than his house.
980,000 going once, twice. Sold to the gentleman from Philadelphia.
Wait, that stamp was part of my lot. You can't just...
But the gavel had fallen. The room erupted into applause, drowning out his protest. The sale was final. Michael pushed through the murmuring crowd into the auction office, demanding to speak with the manager.
I want those stamps back. The lot was sold as a whole. You can't carve it up after the fact.
The sale is final, sir. The Jenny was listed separately, as noted in your consignment contract.
That's theft. I signed for the whole lot. They were all my father's.
Then, read the fine print. All items sell individually. We have no obligation to reverse.
Michael stormed out to the parking lot, fingers shaking as he dialed his mother.
Mom, listen to me. Dad's stamps just sold for almost $1 million. That one stamp alone, they cheated us.
$1 million, Michael. You said it was just paper. You said the auction would clear clutter.
How could I know? Dad never said anything. We need a lawyer. We can still stop it.
Elizabeth lowered the phone. She remembered how Charles would linger over certain albums, his fingers tracing the stamps, as if they held a message he never spoke. Elizabeth walked to Charles's study, the air still holding the scent of old paper and leather. Her hand brushed across his thinking journal. The one he never let her open. She flipped through the pages until a folded sheet slipped out, a yellowed paper with a faded sketch of an upside-down airplane.
The 1918 inverted Jenny, purchased with the last money I had before the war. I promised to give it to the one who saw the beauty in small things. He never told me where it came from. Always said it was just a lucky find at a flea market. The stamp belongs to the past, to a debt I can never repay, but I'll keep it safe until she's ready.
She reached into the drawer where Charles kept his few personal photographs. Her fingers closed around an old black and white print. The image showed a teenage girl with her arm around a young boy, both grinning at the camera. On the back, Charles had written, "Catherine and me, 1955.
It's Catherine, the sister he lost. The conversation Charles started a dozen times but never finished.
Elizabeth pressed the photo to her chest, understanding at last that Charles had hidden a lifetime of longing in those tiny squares of paper. The study seemed colder now. Outside, the afternoon light dimmed. She knew she had to find out what else Charles had kept for Catherine. Edward settled into his hotel room, the inverted Jenny safe in its protective sleeve. He positioned a magnifying glass, his trained postal inspector's eyes scanning for any hidden damage. Beneath the stamps mount, A tiny irregularity caught the light, a ridge no thicker than an onion skin. With surgical tweezers, he lifted the stamp and extracted a folded wisp of paper, crisp as autumn leaf.
That's not packing material. That's intentional.
He unfolded the sheet. The heading read, "Codicil to the last will and testament of Charles Whitmore." Below, a notary's stamp and a familiar signature. Edward had authenticated enough documents in his career to know it was genuine.
I hereby revoke all prior bequests and leave my entire stamp collection to my sister Catherine Whitmore.
Edward set the paper down, his collector's thrill replaced by unease. This codicil meant the collection, worth millions, belonged to a woman he had never met. He sat back, the weight of the hidden will settling on him. For now the family had no idea, but he knew his duty. Edward read the codicil again, slowly. The legal language was precise. Charles had revoked all prior wills concerning the stamp collection.
To my sister Catherine, who raised me when our parents passed, I leave my collection. It was always hers in my heart.
As a former postal inspector, Edward had seen wills disregarded and promises broken. He wouldn't let that happen here.
The auction sale might be final, but this codicil supersedes everything. The collection's legal owner is Catherine.
He considered the widow and son he'd never met. They likely believed the stamps had been lost in a bad deal.
I have to find Elizabeth Whitmore. She needs to know what her husband hid.
Edward pulled out the auction catalog, where the consignor's information was listed. Michael Whitmore's phone number stared back at him.
Calling the son would be a mistake. He'd likely try to bury this. I'll go straight to Elizabeth.
He slipped the onion skin paper into a protective sleeve, then locked it in his briefcase for the morning. Tomorrow, he would drive to her home. Tonight, the secret stayed with him. The next morning, Elizabeth's phone rang before her coffee had cooled. An unfamiliar number.
Hello.
Mrs. Whitmore, my name is Edward Braxton. I am the collector who bought your husband's stamps at auction.
I know about the sale. My son already called. What do you want?
I found something inside the lot. Something that belongs to your family, not to me. I'd rather show you in person.
Elizabeth's pulse quickened. After a pause, she agreed to meet that afternoon at her home. She found Michael in the driveway, polishing his car, still fuming from the auction. She told him about the call.
He wants more money. That's all this is. Don't let him in, Mom.
He said it was something personal, something your father hid. I need to know what it is.
Fine, but I'll be right outside. If he tries anything, I am calling the police.
Michael hunched over his phone in the car, scrolling through the auction catalog for the buyer's registration name.
I need to speak with Edward Braxton. He bought a lot at your Sunday sale. This is urgent.
The auction clerk refused to share any contact details. Michael hung up and slammed the steering wheel. Meanwhile, Elizabeth sorted through the study, clearing surfaces for the visitor. She wanted no distraction from whatever truth was coming. Inside a storage bin behind Charles's desk, she found a cigar box bound with brittle twine. It had been hidden for years. Inside lay a stack of letters, all unsealed, all addressed to Catherine in Charles's hand.
Dear Cat, I dreamt of the garden again. Do you remember the rose bushes? I do. Every thorn.
Another letter held a dried flower, its color long faded. Charles had poured decades of silence onto these pages.
He kept her in his heart all these years, and I never asked. I just let the silence grow.
I couldn't reach him anywhere, but I'll be waiting when he gets here.
A sedan pulled into the driveway. Elizabeth saw Michael's car parked down the street, a silhouette behind the wheel. Edward Braxton stepped out, a briefcase in hand. He straightened his jacket before ringing the bell.
Mr. Braxton, please come in.
I am sorry for the secrecy. As a retired postal inspector, I've learned to trust only what I can verify in person.
He opened his briefcase and withdrew a protective sleeve. Inside was the onion skin codicil, folded but unmistakably legal. The document read, I hereby revoke all prior bequests and leave my entire stamp collection to my sister Catherine Whitmore.
His sister. All those years. Charles never stopped loving her through those stamps.
It's notarized and dated 3 weeks before his passing. It's legally binding. The collection belongs to Catherine now.
Elizabeth pressed a hand to her mouth. The codicil's signature was unmistakably Charles's, every letter a confession.
I can help you contact your sister, but first, you need to understand what this means for your son.
The front door clicked shut. Elizabeth stood at the window, watching Michael's silhouette shift behind the wheel. She stepped onto the porch and motioned for him. He crossed the lawn with the coiled energy of a man expecting a fight.
What did that old man want? Another chance to squeeze us?
Elizabeth held out the codicil. Michael snatched it, scanning the words with visible contempt.
This is a fake. Dad would never cut me out for a sister who never even called.
The notary seal is real. The handwriting is his. He made this choice knowing you couldn't undo it.
She abandoned him. She got married and left him with nothing. Now she gets a fortune.
She raised him when their parents died. He never forgot that. And I won't let you forget it either.
Then choose her. But don't expect me to stand here and smile while you give away what should be ours.
The door slammed. Elizabeth sat alone, the codicil trembling in her lap, her husband's last wish heavier than any inheritance. Elizabeth pushed herself up from the couch and walked to Charles's study. The codicil clutched to her chest. She retrieved the cigar box from behind the desk, the brittle twine still loose from her earlier discovery. Inside, beneath the older letters, lay a single sealed envelope with "For Catherine, after I am gone," written across the front.
My dear cat, if you are reading this, I have passed. I've hidden a codicil inside the stamp collection you loved so much, it leaves everything to you. I never told Elizabeth my plan. I couldn't, but I need you to know I never forgot. Please come home.
The letter was dated the same week as the codicil. Charles had planned for this moment all along.
He wanted me to find this. He wanted me to bring her back.
She closed the box and pressed the letter to her heart. Then she reached for the old cordless phone on the study desk. The dial tone hummed in her ear, waiting. Elizabeth's decision was made. Now she had to find the words. Outside the study window, the last light of afternoon faded. Somewhere far away, a sister she hadn't seen in 40 years was about to hear her name. The old rotary dial clicked through the number from Charles's address book, folded beside a photo of a smiling teenage girl. In a cottage, miles away, Catherine Whitmore lifted a teacup to her lips when the phone shattered the quiet.
Hello, Catherine? It's Elizabeth. Elizabeth Whitmore. I need to talk to you about Charles.
Elizabeth, it's been 40 years. What could you possibly want?
Elizabeth closed her eyes, the codicil's paperweight heavy in her lap.
Charles hid a codicil. The entire stamp collection, over $2 million, he left it to you.
To me? He cut me off after he married you. Why would he do that?
He never forgot. There's a letter he wrote for you. Please, come home. I am begging you.
I'll be there. Tomorrow.
That evening, Elizabeth didn't sleep. She pulled the wedding album from the shelf, the one Charles never opened in her presence. Tucked behind their wedding photo was a smaller snapshot, a teenage girl in a faded dress, her arm around a solemn boy.
That's her. The sister he lost.
On the back, Charles had written, "Catherine, age 17, the day our parents died. She promised to take care of me. She kept her promise."
She was just a girl. She raised him alone.
The wedding photo was next. Charles and Elizabeth, young and happy, but behind the lace, Charles's smile didn't reach his eyes. Catherine had not been invited. Charles told her it was a private ceremony. The real reason was deeper. Elizabeth had felt threatened by the bond between brother and sister.
I didn't want to share him. I made him choose, and he chose me, but it broke his heart.
She set the album aside and stared at the codicil, Charles's handwriting, sloping and frail, a final attempt to mend what she had broken. Morning would bring Catherine. For the first time in 40 years, Elizabeth would have to face the woman she had wronged. That morning, Michael sat across from a gray-suited lawyer in a cramped office. He'd paid $200 for a consultation. The lawyer skimmed the codicil and set it down. No lopolas, notarized, dated, witnessed. Any court would uphold it.
So there's nothing. My father cut me out for a woman I've never met.
He left the office and drove straight to his mother's street. But he parked 3 houses down, his hands gripping the wheel. He couldn't go inside. Not yet. So he sat on the curb, arms folded, watching the house like a guard without a post. Inside, Elizabeth stared at the driveway from the living room window. She'd pressed her best blouse and tucked the codicil into her pocket. A pale blue sedan turned the corner, its engine quieter than the beating of her heart. The car slowed at the curb. The driver's door opened, and a woman in a simple cardigan stepped out. White hair, sad eyes, a ghost from 40 years past. Catherine held only a small purse. No luggage. She hadn't decided whether to stay or to flee back to her quiet cottage. She climbed the porch steps, raised a trembling hand, and pressed the doorbell. Inside, Elizabeth's breath caught. Elizabeth opened the door to see Catherine standing in the morning light. Her face mirrored Elizabeth's, lined with years, but the eyes unchanged.
Catherine.
Elizabeth.
They stood in the doorway, the silence stretching, until Elizabeth stepped aside and gestured inside. In the living room, they sat opposite each other, the codicil resting on the coffee table, like a verdict.
I never blamed Charles. I blamed you for pushing me out of his life.
I was selfish. I saw how much he loved you, and I couldn't share him.
I lost him long before he died. And I lost you that same day.
Elizabeth reached across the table. Catherine took her hand, her tears spilling over. The codicil rested between them. No longer a legal weapon, but a bridge built from Charles's final hope for his 2 lost sisters. The next morning, Elizabeth and Catherine sat in a quiet law office. The codicil on the mahogany desk. Edward Braxton arrived to witness the transfer. He nodded and stood beside the lawyer. The lawyer confirmed the codicil's power. The stamp collection, valued at $2.7 million, now belonged to Catherine. Catherine signed with a shaking hand. Elizabeth placed her own hand over it, steadying the pen.
Charles wanted you to have this. Michael gets nothing.
Outside the window, Michael watched. He had not been asked to come inside. He saw the pen move, saw his mother's nod, and felt the final door close.
I threw away a fortune for nothing. Dad knew I wasn't ready.
Edward shook Elizabeth's hand and departed. The sisters stayed, arms linked. When they stepped out, Michael had vanished. Only the empty curb remained. That evening, Elizabeth led Catherine into Charles's study, the empty shelves now a quiet witness. Catherine reached for the one album that had never been sold, the thick black ledger Charles kept locked in his desk.
He wrote little notes in the margins. Tiny words meant only for me.
From a hidden pocket inside the spine, a yellowed note slipped out. Charles's final message of love.
In his last days, he spoke of you. His one regret was the rift between us.
Catherine pressed the note to her lips. They opened more albums, finding slips of paper tucked behind stamps.
He remembered everything. Our pet rabbit, the first rose he grew, the time he broke his arm.
The stamps became more than rare finds. They were Charles's diary, filled with memories he couldn't voice aloud.
He loved you deeply, and he loved me too. But his heart was always in 2 places.
Together, they turned the pages, laughter breaking through tears, Charles's love finally binding them instead of separating them. Michael appeared in the study doorway, his silhouette blocking the hallway light, his face drawn with exhaustion.
We were just...
I know. I've been standing outside for an hour, listening.
He stepped inside, his hands trembling at his sides. He looked at the 2 women who had once been strangers to each other.
I didn't just lose the money I never had. I lost what Dad wanted me to understand about this family.
And what was that?
That some things are worth more than a price tag. That these stamps were never just paper.
Catherine nodded slowly, a tear tracing her cheek. Elizabeth's hand rested on the codicil, her expression unreadable.
Then learn. For Charles and for what he tried to teach you, I forgive you.
Michael lowered his head. The sisters exchanged a glance, and for the first time, the study felt like a home. Outside, the garden was waiting. Weeks later, Catherine used part of the stamp collection's proceeds to buy a small cottage just 3 streets away.
I never thought I'd live this close to family again. It feels like a homecoming.
Every Sunday, they gathered for dinner, roast chicken, Charles's favorite. The silence of decades was replaced by easy conversation.
Michael found work at a logistics firm. Long hours, steady pay. He never mentioned the auction again.
He's trying. That's all Charles would have wanted.
The stamp collection found a permanent home in Charles's study, displayed in a glass case he would have loved.
Every time I walk past it, I feel him in the room, not as a ghost, but as a constant reminder of what he built.
The sisters tended the garden together, planting roses, the same kind Charles had written about in his letters.
We wasted 40 years over stubborn pride.
Then, let's not waste another day.
One still evening, Elizabeth, Catherine, and Michael gathered in the study. The stamp collection gleamed in its glass case, silent witness to all that had passed.
I'd bought the inverted Jenny with Catherine's savings. She believed in my dream when no one else did.
We were so young, he rode his bicycle all the way to the post office, clutching that stamp like gold.
I never knew that story. I just saw dollar signs.
The journal pages rustled as Elizabeth turned them, each entry a breadcrumb leading Charles back to his sister. The inverted Jenny rested under glass, its airplane forever upside down, a mistake that had become priceless.
Charles left us a map, not of countries, but of his heart.
I am sorry it took me so long to read it.
Behind them, Charles's photograph seemed to soften in the lamplight, his smile finally reaching his eyes. The study was full of stamps, of memories, and of the family Charles had always wanted. The sun lowered, the windows glowing amber. Inside, laughter drifted through the open study door. The rose bushes Catherine had planted were thriving, their petals catching the last light of day. In the study, Elizabeth poured tea. Catherine pointed at a stamp, a shared smile on their faces.
Do you remember when Charles found this? He paid a quarter.
He said it was the best investment he ever made. Not for money, but for the memory.
Michael sat apart, wiping the dust from Charles's magnifying glass, its brass shining under the lamp.
He always told me to look closer. I thought he meant the stamps.
On the shelf, the inverted Jenny rested in its frame, a small plaque reading, "For Catherine, with love, Charles." The real treasure was not that $1 million stamp, but the love hidden inside it for 50 years. The house stood silent. Inside, a family finally whole. The days grew longer, and the house on Oakwood Drive settled into a quiet rhythm. Roses climbed the trellis that Charles had built. Every Sunday, the 3 of them sat in the garden, watching the sun dip below the roofline, talking about stamps and stories. Michael polished the magnifying glass until it caught the morning light like a prism. He had learned to look closer. Catherine's roses bloomed the same pale pink she had described to Charles in a letter never sent. One afternoon, Elizabeth opened the study window and found a single stamp tucked into the frame, a forgotten penny black, slipped there by Charles years ago. She laughed, soft and low, and called for Catherine to come see. The stamp joined the others, not for its worth, but for the memory of a man who hid love in the smallest places. In the end, the auction and the fortune faded into background noise. What remained was a garden, a study, and a family patched together by paper. And whenever the light hit the glass case just right, the inverted airplane seemed to right itself, a silent promise fulfilled. The true treasure was never the stamp. It was the love Charles had hidden inside it, waiting to be found.